As we move into segment 3, making a run is going to require a quarterback. And both of our programs in terms of recruiting class 2026 have found that. Ryder Lyons, 5-star quarterback heading to the BYU Cougars. Keisean Henderson, 5-star quarterback heading to the Houston Cougars. We can debate who's better when they're playing in Big 12 championship games down the road, Jake. That's a later episode. As far as this goes, it feels like both teams and programs are like constructing entire classes around these quarterbacks and their personas. Houston added a couple of 4-star receivers over the weekend, is looking to add a big fella this week. We'll see if that ends up coming through or not. BYU, I know it's done the same. You can tell us how exactly.
Well, so here's the thing. I can tell you. So Ryder Lyons, obviously, he's the kind of the centerpiece of BYU's recruiting class, which is in the top 20 nationally. And that's where BYU wants to be annually, if at all possible. But last night, not last night, 2 nights ago, I should say, you had a Jax Tanner out of Idaho, Rocky Mountain High School in near the Boise area. He's a 4-star offensive lineman, commits to BYU. Guess why he committed to BYU in large part? He says that Ryder Lyons was pushing him to commit. Well, hey, shocking. A star quarterback wants a road grader offensive lineman in front of him? Absolutely. Guys like Keisean Henderson and Ryder Lyons, when you get them committed to your program and they buy fully in with those commitments, they completely change the perception of how these two programs, speaking of Houston and BYU, have gone about recruiting. They're putting together absolutely dynamic 2026 recruiting classes. I've got no problem saying right now, should things hold for BYU, this will be the best recruiting class in program history. And the hope is that down the line with the Ryder Lyons at quarterback, etc., that it'll pay off in spades, as you mentioned, with maybe some Big 12 title game appearances, championships, and maybe a college football playoff berth or two. But that's the same hope for what Houston's doing right now as well, because these quarterbacks, when you get that type of athlete, other players want to sign up and play with them because they know the caliber of player that is.
Well, and Keisha's got some swag to him. His whole thing is about keeping Houstonians home, and he wears a raccoon skin cap to 7-on-7 all summer, and he shut down his recruitment to other places, and then came on his official visit to Houston on a weekend. They hosted a bunch of 4-star receivers, including these guys that just committed. Right, like I think it all ties together. He's like, hey, if you come here, I'm gonna be the one throwing you the ball. That's a big deal.
Yeah, so BYU's got a 4-star tight end by the name of Brock Harris who could have gone anywhere in the entire country. He wanted to play with Ryder Lyons. He actually committed before Ryder and was a big part of trying to push Ryder to commit to BYU. But guys want to play together that have grown up playing in the same realm as these players because they know how good they are. But you're right. Guy like Keisean Henderson, he's going to be able to tell guys, hey, I'm going to be that guy under center. I'm going to be slinging you the rock. Come play with me. Ryder Lyons is doing the same thing at BYU, whether it's wide receivers, running backs, offensive linemen. He's telling guys, come be a part of this because we're going to change the perception of BYU nationally, and we're going to go out and win a lot, hopefully.
Well, and I guess what's interesting is, like, if we're projecting, whether we talk about the 5+11 model and how, like, it's going to take some getting the, get a kind of build the Big 12 up as we get towards that. I mentioned Houston plays LSU in the, early part of the season, 2027. That would be Keyshawn's sophomore or redshirt freshman, but depending how things go. I do feel like at least our two programs, and you can throw Texas Tech with their 5-star tackle in as well, are building this recruiting class in a way that's okay. If the deal is we got to match those guys over in the SEC, those other Southerners, we're loading up. Let's do it, because I don't think you can, with Houston, BYU, Texas Tech getting 5 stars, that argument like, well, they've got better players seems to kind of fall on its face, right? I mean, that's been the argument this whole time.
Yeah, no, the argument's been there the whole time, but you're right. It completely flies in the face of what the traditional tropes seem to be about. I look at it as BYU and Houston, they're getting some momentum right now. Now, on the recruiting trail, it's good to have momentum, but you know what helps that momentum stay in place? Winning. That's the thing about this. You've got to go out and win with these guys. And yeah, Keisean Henderson, as soon as he gets to campus in Houston there, he's going to be a guy that people are going to be like, hey, when's he finally going to be the guy? A guy like Ryder Lyons, he is going on a mission for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. So he's going to be at least a year behind a guy like Keisean Henderson because he'll be more of the 2027 class before he ultimately enrolls. But as soon as they enroll, Parker, they've got to make impressions in terms of making impact on the field to keep that momentum alive.
And I guess that's the thing is like it just comes down to like now that you're getting the guys, they've got to stay and they've got to perform
Well,
on
yeah,
the football field.
that's a great point. The retention point with the transfer portal, NIL, who knows what the future of that holds? You got to keep your guys in place. You can't have them come in, win that press conference, as they call it, with a recruiting win, and then have them walk out the door a year later. That just doesn't work.
Well, it certainly would be an abject failure on the system, and that's it. And I don't think I get that vibe from Keisean himself. I'm still getting to know the other kids that are committed in the class a little bit more. I do think though that you're starting to see those kind of things chip away at the armor that the SEC has had on at least the media version of this, because perception is such a big part of this. More picking polls, picking spots in a playoff, because it is at some point people in a room, right? Like it's hard to think about like BYU got left out last year because there were people in a room that chose someone else. And like they chose a team that BYU beat for what it's worth.
SMU.
And ISMU, yeah. And I think that's shout out to our newest Locked On SMU show, by the way. A weird way to shout them out. I feel like you're just trying to like put stuff on paper for that conversation to be had, right?
Well,
BYU knows as well as anyone.
Yeah, that's the thing about it is you do need to make an impression with that. But I will say this, and I want to get your thought on this, is BYU is a program that's obviously built around the church culture, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Some of your Houston followers probably know it better as the Mormon church. Either way, BYU recruits obviously to that. The honor code that's involved in that, the fact that it's a faith-based institution, that's what BYU kind of stands for. And I know that Houston, it's a secular school, but I love what Willie Fritz's messaging has been. Similar to what Kalani Sitake talks about when it comes to the church and what BYU, it stands for more than just football. It stands, you're representing the church, this university. What I've loved about Willie Fritz, and I want your thought on this, is that he has said, hey, Houston is for Houstonians. Come be a part of your community school. And even though BYU is a faith-based institution, I feel like the messaging, whether it comes from the secular side for Houston or the more religious side for BYU, play into what you can highlight. And that's what Houston's doing, I think, with their recruiting class, saying, hey, come represent your hometown of the greater Houston area.
With the commitment Sunday night, Houston launches into the top half of the Big 12 in most rankings across the board, and they only have 14 commits thus far, looking at a few more for the end of July. I think they'll get a couple of those, but that is all to say Fritz's big claim to fame in recruiting class 2026 has been that he didn't have to take a plane. It's all been places he could drive to from the Third Ward, which is a neighborhood in Houston. And some of those are long drives. I mean, like Midland, Texas is 5 or 6 hours easily, if not longer. But I think that's an interesting way to go about it, because Houston is a hot ground for Texas, A&M, Oklahoma, LSU. And he's like, no, let's just keep these kids here and like make it the Houston All-Star team. We'll be all right, and it's a pretty much like you're saying, like a representation of, in your case, a representation of character in the church. I think representation, not that there's lacking of character in the city of Houston, but representation of the region is equally powerful in a weird way.
It needs to be that. That's the thing about these two programs need to recruit to their strengths, because there's other power programs out there that have SEC or Big Ten names next to them that are going to obviously have a draw to them. What Houston and BYU need to do is try and differentiate themselves with their own unique messaging. And I think both of them have been very smart about how they've gone about it recently.
Tuesday, Coogs Day wrapping up, but Jake, I don't mean to push about that whole Red Sox. The other Jake, we'll call him the other Jake. And what else you guys got going on? But you guys have a busy week at Locked On Cougars planned.
Yeah, we got a lot going on. Obviously, continuing to track the Jake Retzloff news as it comes in. He's officially withdrawn from BYU. Where does he end up next? We'll break that down. We're getting closer and closer to training camp beginning. We've got big questions, as I like to call them, ahead of training camp that we're addressing. And recruiting, you're doing the same thing essentially, it feels like, down there in Houston, Parker, because the recruiting for Houston, it stays red hot, it looks like.
Stays red hot. I will say, Connor Wegman, the quarterback, we know where some of the people are going to be to talk through previewing the season some too. Also got some guys that have watched the basketball side of things, and we're putting together 2026 class in basketball and all of that. So Lots of things at Locked On Cougs as well. Find either Locked On Cougs or Locked On Cougars wherever you get your podcast. The latest things on the Cougars of BYU and Houston each and every day. And we can both say, go Cougs. Go Cougs.
Go Coogs.